Hello, I'm Frank Conkling, and this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS workshop. Today we're focusing on the parcel fabric, and specifically we're going to take a deep dive into the parcel fabric structures. And having done quite a few parcel fabric migrations, um, there's a lot of different ways we can do a migration. And most of the times we attempt to go and modify it so that there's as little disturbance within the actual organization as possible. But today we're only going to talk about the standard sort of structures. We're not going to talk much about any sort of modifications on here. Before we start, let's sort of remind everybody, this is Panda Consulting. If the QR code down here in the lower right corner actually will get you to our website. It will go and tell you who we are, what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. It also has some links over there for our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel now has like 110 different videos up there. We record these videos twice a month and we immediately put them up there. If you want to get notified of when these are up there, go ahead and subscribe. Also, just a reminder, Panic Consulting is an ESRI Silver business partner. We are the first business partner in the nation to get the parcel management specialty. Together with, we have the release ready and the state and local government specialties. So let's get started. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to look at the parcel fabric and we're going to dig into the data model. How does the parcel fabric work? And then we're going to be looking at some of the standard elements in there that if you are not in the parcel fabric, you may not be familiar with what these things are or what they do. And we're going to talk about them. So the first thing we're going to do is once we go and explore the data model a little bit more, we're going to look at the records feature class, what it does, some of the unique elements of it. Then we're going to talk about different parcel types, the different things that you can add into the parcel fabric. And this is sort of a minimal configuration, but it is something you need to think about. Then we're going to talk about the points inside the parcel fabric and what they really do and some of the nuances associated with them, the connection lines, and then finally we're going to talk about topology and attribute rules on here. So let's go ahead and start at this right now. So the first thing I want to do is let's talk about this data model. This data model is very interesting because there is what's called a controller object. This is the parcel fabric controller object. And that parcel fabric controller object sort of contains the code and organizes everything in here. Matter of fact, if you look over at this snapshot of our catalog that we have, the blue object is the parcel fabric object. We'll explore that a little bit more in detail. But then what you'll see there is a feature class called a records feature class. That records feature class actually has, it's an organizing feature. Again, we'll look at that. And there's a direct connection between the parcel fabric and the actual records. And then off of the records, everything gets related to the records so that you have connection lines, you have points, and you have the various parcel types. These parcel types each have lines and polygons associated with them. So everything gets related back to the record. All right. The record is critical with the parcel fabric. And then finally, with the parcel fabric controller object, we also have various elements in here. We have some rules. We have topology rules. We also have attribute rules, some of which are come as standard and some of which you could add also. And then we have error features on there. So let's look at first the parcel fabric itself. So inside the parcel fabric, let's start with this definition that the parcel fabric, because it has topology rules on it, must be inside of a feature data set. A feature data set is in a geodatabase, whether it's a file geodatabase or an enterprise geodatabase, and it's an organizing structure. And the main component of it is that every feature class inside of that organization actually has the same spatial reference, the same resolution on there, same projection and everything. So This way, Esri can be assured that when you have topology, everything is in the same projection, it's the same resolution, and it's going to go and supposedly fit on top of one another. So when it starts doing topology, you could be assured it's on there. Interestingly, for those of you that haven't used feature data sets that much, a feature data set is actually a logical construct within the database. Inside the actual geodatabase, there is no such thing. It's just a note that all of these go together. So if you look there, everything that's in a geodatabase is stored at the same level. But Esri then marks it that, oh, these all go together because they all have the same spatial domain. So, and the reason I mention that is that if you have a specific feature class, you can't have that same feature class or something that with the same name in a different feature data set because it really is at the same level. So they actually have to be named slightly differently if you're going to have similar features inside of a geodatabase. All right. So this right now is ArcGIS Pro 3.4 that I'm using. It just came out a couple weeks ago. And I wanted to show you something that is new inside of here with 3.4. So to load a parcel fabric into a map document, it is you go and you select the parcel fabric and you right click on it, you say add to new. And I'm going to add it to a new map here. All right. And this is the new thing. Inside of 3.4, when you go to add it, it will prompt you and say, are you going to be doing this for editing or are you going to be doing it for publication? Because there's a difference in how it loads them up. In this case, let's go ahead and add it as layering, which will group it normally, and it sets all of the group layers. It sets all the attribute rules, all the definition queries for you on there accordingly for that. If I go in here and say, let's add this to, sorry, let's go ahead and add that to a new map document, and I tell it, this time it's going to be for publication. Let's look at the difference in here. All right, there's the parcel fabric object and the topology, and it adds it. But if I look at my parcel grouping, I no longer have my history. Whereas in here, I actually have my history on here. So it's now differentiating between editing, where you've got your history available, and publication, where it's just giving you the current elements in here. And if we look at the properties of this under the definition query, there is no definition query, but they had to have set something separately because there's got to be something there that's a little bit different. All right, so there is a difference now. Just know that with 3.4, there is a difference here. So when I loaded it, again, this is the proper way of loading it on here. You'll also notice slightly different element in here, and that with 3.4, when I create a parcel fabric, it now places the adjustment lines in the same feature data set as the others were. Previous versions, it would put them external, and sometimes you had issues with those. All right, so let's go back to the slides here. So this is the first thing we want to talk about is the records. So on the records, we actually can see it here. This is a feature class. This is a Polygon feature class on here. When some people start with the parcel fabric, they're like, well, where are my records over here? It turns out that they group them under one called the parcel fabric. So it's actually pulled into your project and it's a main component of there. And if we look at this feature class, what it's got it, and it's got a couple things in here. It's got an object ID. Interesting. Parcel fabric uses the object ID is not as important as it used to be, but there still is an object ID. More importantly now is the global ID. The global IDs are automatically added on here. There is a standard shape field. There is a name field. A name field, and let's see if we go in here. The name field on the records feature class, and this is important, the name field on the records feature class must be unique. And if I attempt to create another record that has the same name, it is marked as saying, no, this is unique. Don't have two records with the same name in them. Other than that, it's just a normal text file. So on here, you also have a record type here. This is a record. The record type here is a long integer, and normally you would go and add a domain on here. This is one of the first things you'll do when you go and create a parcel fabric is define the domain. This is optional. What types of records are you going to have in here? And there's usually a lot of discussion on how you want to do that, but that is a long integer field that we use. Then we have recorded date. This is the recorded date for that record. Again, a record is supposed to be a transaction. It's memorializing a transaction, so it normally is going to be the date at which that transaction is recorded or put in the official records. And then created by, created date, last edited by, last edit date. These are very important. And for those people that are playing around with it for the first time, let me give you a little warning. When you create a parcel fabric, it automatically goes and turns on editor tracking. Now that you would say, well, that's fine. But the important thing about parcel fabric is that it gives you an empty structure. So the first thing you have to do is you have to load your data in there. And when you load your data in there, it marks that you created that data on that date. So if you wish to go and maintain the creation information and modification information on your existing data, be sure that when you're starting to append things, you have that turned off. You'll also 3.2 started ensuring that editor tracking is turned on before you start doing any edits, but just be aware you'll have to turn it back on once you get everything loaded in there. Create a parcel count. This is the parcel count of the all of the individual parcels that are related to a record. Now, again, a record really is an individual transaction. And a record, normally, if you only have one parcel that you create on it, it normally will be the parcel. Or if you have something historic, the actual parcel count will be higher. And if you've got disconnected parcels, it will also be higher than that. So you just want to be careful when how many parcels you have on there and such. For those of you that are bringing things in and you don't have a record table or a plan table, for example, if you're getting it from ArcMap, there's a threshold, and once you reach that threshold, um, the migration script will stop creating geometry for you. While it kind of satisfies the minimum requirements for a parcel fabric, that's not a great practice. You want to go and make sure that when you're migrating data in, you assign as discrete records as you possibly can. And then retired parcel count is how many of the parcels are associated with that record are actually retired or marked where the retired by record has a value in it. And then finally, we have shape length, shape area, and the global ID. So again, the critical elements on the records is that A, you always have that records feature class, and that it is the name field is somewhat different from the other name fields in your normal parcel types in that it has to be unique. Just sort of to look at that again on here, it allows nulls, but it doesn't say anything about unique. That's actually in the software saying, nope, this has to be unique on here. All right, let's go back here again. Let's talk about, that was records. Parcel type. So a parcel type is in fact sort of what types of parcels are you going to be actually editing and maintaining inside of the parcel fabric. And one of the words that I said there is very important. What types of parcels are you going to be maintaining? Not that you've got in your inventory, but what are you going to maintain? Because a parcel fabric really is set up for maintaining parcels. I have some clients that say, well, we've got other things that we'd like to include inside of here, but we don't maintain them well. Well, the question is, you have to think about, do you really want to put them in the parcel fabric, or you just want to maintain them outside? Within the parcel fabric, everything, every polygon has to have lines on it. So that the question is, do you normally have lines on those polygons that you're thinking about putting into the parcel fabric? You want to make sure you do that. So when you create a parcel type, all right, it will create a polygon feature class and a line feature class. And you can see that here where we took parcels and added a parcel, and it created parcels, polygons and parcel lines on here. And just to demonstrate how to create one, by the way, this is the resulting parcel fabric here. To add a parcel type, you right click on the controller object, say manage, and say add a parcel type. And you define, maybe you want to do lots also. And then the question is whether it's for administrative boundaries or not. Administrative boundaries, for large areas. Um, I would say you want to think hard about whether or not you want to maintain them as administrative boundaries. Again, whether you want to keep them in there, it winds up excluding that parcel type. That's an administrative boundary from certain topology rules. But let's go ahead and create that lots parcel type so we can see what happens as it goes and creates this. By the way, just a reminder, if you're here live, you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them over in the chat window. Chris is here, and he's going to go and make sure that he gets me to pay attention to those once they're there. All right, so it just went and told me, by the way, that it did add that other parcel type. And when I go and refresh this, I can actually see that I now have lots and I have lot lines in here. With these, when it's in the parcel fabric, these polygons and line feature classes are actually set up so that they maintain all of the inventory for those parcels, whether they are current or retired. By default, the parcel fabric maintains history. I shouldn't say by default, because you cannot turn that off. The parcel fabric maintains history so that as we're going and bringing that in, um, if something is marked historic or if something is split, that then goes into the historic layer. Right now, there's no way to turn that off. I don't think there's been a whole lot of outcry and saying, please disable history, but right now it's in there. Um, the way that you differentiate between this is for example, I'm going to go over here to the parcels, and I'm going to go to my properties, and there is a definition query against this that says retired by record is null. There is inside of this, and let's go back here and see, once we look at this, the polygon feature class here, there actually is a field called created by record, and there's a field called retired by record. Those control whether or not they're current or whether they are historic. So let's dig into the actual schema for the standard parcel type polygon feature class. It has also a name in here. That name, by the way, is the identifier for it. In the case of a parcel, it's a parcel name or identification number like a PIN. This does not have to be unique. And you can actually rename the alias on here if you want to call it something else. You then have the created by record. Again, this defines whether or not it is a current or not. All features inside of a parcel fabric should have a value stored in a created by record attribute field for everything that's in there. If it does not, it's not in compliance with it, and it could cause you problems later on. There is in fact, an attribute rule that checks for that. Retired by record again is what's marked as far as whether or not not it is historic. And then you have a couple of fields that are directly related to area. The first one is called stated area. The stated area is the area that's on the record. Now, this can be in the United States here, this could be square footage, this could be acres. There's a couple different variations on here because right after that is the stated area unit. All right, so that we have several clients that if a parcel is smaller than an acre, they don't list the acre, they list the square footage on it. So you'll find that you'll be mixing these a lot, whether or not it's acres or not acres, and then whether or not you use the stated area unit of this. The stated area unit actually has a domain on it. If we actually look here, let's go back here and let's look at our data structure here. So if we look at our stated area unit here, there actually is a domain. And this domain, let's move over a little further here. This domain has all sorts of varieties of possible um, units that we have in here. This is a coded value domain, by the way, so that it's not text-based, it's coded value. So there is a code that gets put in there. All right. The next field is the calculated area. This is the calculated area, all right, that's calculated from the COGO dimensions on the parcel lines. All right. And again, the important thing is if there are no missing, or if there are missing or partial COGO dimensions, this area is not calculated. So this can be thought of as not necessarily the mapped area as much as the COGO area. If you do not have COGO for the lines, it doesn't automatically calculate this. Often our clients have asked us, so just go ahead and calculate whether we have COGO on it or not, because there might be a lot of public land survey system type of areas in here, aliquot parcels and stuff that don't have COGO, and you can actually utilize this field for that also. The next field is the misclosure ratio field. The misclosure ratio field, and this is when you've got a traverse on here, on that traverse, the traverse is, if we look at a closed traverse, it starts at one point, goes through a series of courses, and then we'll attempt to close at another point here. The misclosure ratio is this misclosure distance, which is the distance off here in which it didn't close, divided by the overall perimeter of the actual traverse on here. A lot of people think that this is a statement of accuracy, but the reality is that this ratio and the distance, these are actually a statement of precision. They are not accuracy, they are precision in here. How precise did that actually close? So just be aware that it's not necessarily accuracy that's stored in here, but it is, did my COGO traverse close on here? That's those two that are stored. We then also have global ID. Again, global ID is critical in the parcel fabric. Every feature class inside the parcel fabric has a global ID on it. Is it a seed? This is a Boolean field. It's yes or no, and it actually has a domain on it and says, is this a field? And this is used by the parcel fabric to determine whether or not your parcel is in need of getting built or expanded out until it matches the lines associated with it. If it's a seed, it's actually shown as a small polygon. It's actually a polygon, but it's a small polygon. If it's not a seed, it should be the entire parcel built out there. And there are tricks that you can do to go and say you can reduce it to a seed, fix some of your parcels, and then tell it to expand again or rebuild itself, and it will. Validation, this determines whether or not you've gone and done any using the using the error inspector, whether or not you've done any attribute rule validation on here. All right. It uses the validation status domain to whether or not you've done all the calculation or anything on here. Um, but that's it. Those are the actual default fields that are in here. Now, often, I get asked, well, that's fine, but what happens if I want more in here than that? And so that what we'll often do is we'll go and we'll have another set. For example, this is a separate feature class that the client may want to go and put in here, and they'll have their own additional fields that are part of this. And we'll look here. They've got a couple things here, but well, actually all they have is this one on here. Let's see if we've got a different field here that we can just sort of pull something in here. Um, um, yeah, this was something. This is a demo. Let's just show you how you can do this with soils, just to demonstrate how we do it. So nothing in there either. It looks like I don't have anything in here. So if I were to have another field here, what I could do is I could go and copy and paste that field into here just by going, and I'll just sort of do it here again. Just by going here, oh, here's a field here. I can say copy this field while I'm in Data Designer and go over here and I can paste it and it will paste it in. You do want to be careful though, because if it has a domain against it, if it has a domain here, when you copy and paste it out of one geodatabase into another one, it does not copy the domain. So you want to make sure that you also copy that domain into the geodatabase that you're building it on. All right, now let's go look here. This one, in case, did not have a domain on it, but it would have done that. So you also want to be careful if you've got subtypes. Subtypes are very special and unique component on here. You want to be careful with that when you're going to go and do that. So let's discard that change. All right, that's the polygon for a parcel type. And as you add different parcel types, and you can add as many as you want. I think I've seen at one time, we've got some clients that have over 20 different parcel types in here that they're maintaining on here. And that's really sort of the modification and customization of the parcel fabrics getting to that point. As you add them, you'll see them listed here on that. All right, let's look at the lines. The line feature class is kind of unique because there's a couple elements in here because the parcel fabric really wants to go and keep track of where the lines are and where they came from and such. So you'll see again, you'll see the object ID, you'll see the global ID, you'll see the shape. You'll see the created by records both times. And then you'll start seeing the COGO fields. These are the COGO fields here. The difference between the ArcGIS Pro COGO fields and the ArcMap COGO fields is that the ArcGIS Pro COGO fields are numeric values. They are not text fields as they were in ArcMap. They are numeric values. But you'll also see a couple different things here. For example, COGO is now defined as being direction, distance, radius, and shape length or arc length for curves. It does not include the chord distance or chord length. It does not include the central angle or the delta angle anymore. Esri was evaluating them and realized that while they were used for calculation, they weren't necessarily used for labeling and such. So they're really only storing those labels, those parts of COGO that you're going to be using for labeling. There is this new thing here, though, called Radius 2. And Radius 2, here we go, Radius 2 here, this is when you're storing a spiral curve. So with ArcGIS Pro, you're actually able to go and store spiral curves inside of here, and it stores the parameters for the second radius on here. All right, let's go back here again. Then we come to COGO type. COGO type is actually a way that it keeps track of where the COGO values came from. The COGO values that are stored, you have entered, which means that the user entered it. You have some geometry, which means it came and was inversed or calculated or computed, meaning that a line had a COGO value on it, and it was in some way modified so that it was either divided or split or clipped or whatever. And it's then marked as being from or being computed. The next couple of attribute fields is ground, rotation, and scaling. These are actually used when you have a ground to grid migration on here. Ground to grid will allow you to go and apply an automatic transformation. Now, on the simplest level, that transformation may be rotating the input for you to match whatever is on your source document with the actual bearing basis of your grid. So that if you have something that has an assumed bearing, you can use ground to grid and actually input what that assumed bearing is and then point out on the map where it is. And it will then go and store, yes, these bearing information was, in fact, had a rotation on here. This would be marked as yes. It would tell you what that rotation is and whether or not it was scaled up or down on here. This is used not just to go and maintain information about the COGO, but also it's used for least squares adjustments on here. Again, the more least squares adjustment components on here. These are the direction accuracy and distance accuracies, which are set. And then finally, we have parcel line, not finally. This is the global ID of the parent parcel when it was split to create this line. Again, so it tells you not only that it was computed, but here's the global ID of the one that was used and the one that was split on here. All right, label position. This is a new attribute field that's what came about 3.0. 3.0 it was the first iteration, I think, they put it in. This is where it actually helps you define whether or not it's on the right, the top or the bottom, or whether it's a shared label. This is a really nice feature inside of here. And then we have the standard editor tracking. We have the shape length and the validation status on here. Again, COGO is very important inside, and the parcel fabric is meant to start really collecting data about how were the parcels created, how accurate are they, how well do they match, what are the COGO values on here, where did they come from? It really starts analyzing your data in new ways that we couldn't do before. And this is one of the primary values of the parcel fabric. All right, points. In points, we have a name of a point or a control point in here, created by and retired by records. We have a fixed shape. This is fixed. This is a yes or no, whether it's fixed. This actually indicates whether the point is a control point or whether it cannot or can be changed, whether you can change the geometry on here. There's actually some attribute rules which prevents you, if something is marked as being fixed, it prevents you from actually moving a point on here. So this fixed shape allows you to control whether or not you can adjust or in any way modify it. The adjustment constraint, this indicates whether it behaves, how it behaves with least squares adjustment. And preserve is also whether or not the point will be preserved when associated points or correction points are deleted. All right, these are whether or not the point will be deleted or whether it will be just marked on here. All right, next we get into X, Y, and Z values in here. X, Y accuracy, Z value accuracy, X, Y uncertainty. These are primarily associated with the analysis that's done with with a least squares adjustment. Error ellipse, again, this is error ellipse as a result of an adjusted error to indicate to you where it is, what direction it's going on. This all gets populated as a result of doing a consistency check or a least squares adjustment on here. Again, Parcel Fabric is trying to get you to understand that All of these things that are part of your data set, they're not used just for mapping. They're used for the analysis and figure out how it all fits together, where it came from, and why it's important. Connection lines are actually a special type of line. The special type of line is associated with a record, but it is not part of a polygon boundary. So a connection line can be used to define those types of special lines that you include in there. For example, a meander line or a survey line or a line that on a meets and bounds description that starts at a point of commencement and goes to the point of beginning, what we used to call origin connection lines. Those can all be connection lines. What we're finding, though, is that our clients are using these in many creative ways. For example, since it doesn't have to be part of a boundary line, we have many of our clients going and taking and adding an attribute field called line type and having connection lines in there, but they also can then have either cartography lines in here so that the lines on that cartography, like a tie hook line or a feather or a some sort of label component on here, they are associated with a record, but they don't necessarily define the boundary of it. So it's another way that you can really modify this and make this work with your organization on here. So connection lines especially are really useful, and that's a lot of modification on here. You will see exactly the same information as on a line, but they are slightly different in that they do not have to be on the boundary of a polygon on here. All right, topology rules. If we look here and go to, let's go up here again to our topology. What we'll see is that if I look at the feature classes, it is the feature classes of our standard elements in the parcel fabric. For example, the points, the connection lines, are added parcel types, the parcels and parcel lines, the lots and lot lines. Those are all part, but note, the records do not participate in topology. And adjustment points, adjustment lines, and adjustment vectors, those are the things that were part of that analysis. They are not part of the topology either. If we look at the rules, we can find out that our connection lines endpoints have to have points on the ends of them. Our parcel lines, the lines have to have endpoints on the ends of them. The lines have They must not have dangles, they must not self-overlap, they must not self-intersect, and the lines must be on the boundary on here, and the polygons have to have lines on them. Now, these are sort of the standard rules. So I see a question over. It says, so some organizations use connection lines to represent title line boundaries. Title line boundaries. I'm not familiar with that term. Does that mean some sort of elements in here? For example, let's see if I can explain this another way of what a parcel or what a connection line might be used for. Within a connection line, all right, within a boundary, you have the normal boundaries up here. We have some clients that if this is a road, for example, we have some clients that wish to represent that portion of a road right of way that isn't necessarily part of the parcel, nor would it be included within area calculations, but that might represent some sort of quasi interest for the landowner. It's actually included on the deed, but it's not necessarily a fee conveyance, but it might be reversionary interest in there. So if this is what you mean by title lines, yeah, that is it. Or where there might be a river or some sort of water boundary here, this might be a, this might be a, this might be the boundary line here, but this might wind up becoming a connection line that's coded as some sort of special line. It's some sort of an interest, not the boundary of the parcel, but it's something that's also conveyed with it. All right. Um, Another comment is that also connection lines are primarily used for commencement lines. All right, starting at the southwest, right, starting at the point of commencement here, going along a couple courses to the point of beginning. That's exactly that's the primary use of parcel lines is, or excuse me, of connection lines is that so that you use that. But again, there's lots of ways to go and use it above and beyond that. And that gets into the sort of the customization. And when you start looking at the data that you have and ways that you can be a little bit more creative with it, that's it. So these are the topology rules. These are system added on here, and they're always added on here. There's also some attribute rules that are part of this. These attribute rules, if I go and look here at my data design and my attribute rules here, by default, there is this new, well, it's new, it's been in there a couple issues in that. Again, this is where I said that every record, or excuse me, every feature inside of here is supposed to have a value stored in the created by record attribute field. And this validation rule is one that's run when you actually go and validate your attribute rules. And if it finds that you've got a feature class, or excuse me, you've got a feature, a line, a polygon, a point even that doesn't have a value in there, it will mark that as an error and ask that you go and address that. You can either populate it with it, or you can go and mark it as an exception. Um, but this is one of those things that if you're the first couple times you go and develop a parcel fabric, you'll be missing certain things, especially if you've got existing Kogel lines you want to bring in. This often proves problematic, but it is something you need to be aware of on here, and that's by default. There is no default calculation or constraint attribute rule, but there are default on here. There are actually some ready to use rules in here as it relates to parcel fabric. Um, there are some rules as far as validation on here. There's constraints in here. These are actually import rules. They're actually a whole set of rules specifically for, let's see if we can, nope, you don't have those loaded on here. There are specific rules that are actually pretty interesting if you want to add them. Um, if you're first experimenting, I would say go ahead and try them. Things like I can't have a connection line that's shorter than a certain distance, or I have to make sure that my polygons are more than a certain square footage. Those sorts of rules to sort of apply some more business rules and apply some more rigor to the parcels that are created. Those are the types of rules that Esri has given you. And they're actually very nice rules in here to go and put in here. So, that. So the other thing is the domains. So by default, there are domains that are part of this. And I just want to go and introduce so you're aware of this. You have the PF, by the way, in the parcel fabric, the domains that are specific to the parcel fabric all begin with PF underscore. There's the adjustment constraint. This is where it's constraining the parcel fabric adjustments. That's on the point feature class. There is the PF underscore area units. This is the one that's on the Polygon feature classes that will go and allow you to have the different types of areas within the stated area field. There's the Kogo accuracy, which is used for the Kogo feature class, as far as the parcel fabric accuracy, there's the Kogo, the PF underscore Kogo type. This is the one that has entered from geometry and computed. PF underscore yes, no is used quite a bit. That's just a Boolean. The PF underscore label position is the one which defines whether it's on the left, the right, or is centered on there. Just sort of to go and let you know, if we go here and look at our labels, we actually see with the newer versions of the parcel fabric, you actually have these different labels expressed on here. And they have an expression. And by the way, this expression is the same expression with the exception of, let's get in here, with the exception of the position in which it tells you whether or not it's on the right of the line, whether it's on the left of the line, or whether it's along the line. So just so you know, these three label expressions that come with every new Kogo line, these are all the same. The only difference is whether or not, or where it actually places the label on here. So just be aware that that's part of this, the new labeling modifications on here, and I really like those. And again, validation status is, this is the domain for the validation status. Well, hopefully this is not too deep for you, but hopefully this gives you a little bit better understanding of the default components of the parcel fabric and why and how each of them works and why you have this default structure to start with. And that's what it is. It's the beginning of your parcel migration. It helps you to understand how it all fits together, how it all works. All right. Do we have any other comments or questions out here?
Not at the moment.
Well, listen, thank you all. I hope you all enjoyed the workshop, and stick around if you want to talk some more. We're going to stop the recording.